Recently, gaming news website Massively OP came out with this article citing Brad McQuaid's death as a reason to be uncertain about the future of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. And this stuck out to me because actually just a few days before that, I was having a conversation with a fan on Twitter who is having some of the same concerns. And so I was going to make a video about that exact topic. And this article just kind of confirmed my theory that if he was having thoughts like that, there were probably lots of other people who were sharing some of the same concerns. And I think it's a totally fair discussion that we should all be having together. Now, for the game journalists, though, I think they do have a little bit more of a responsibility to have a better understanding of what they're talking about before they go and broadcast their opinion. But I'll get into that later, because even though I'm not a developer, I can quickly think of a few key points here that seem to be missed and should be considered. So let me try to set the record straight.
This is BazgrimTV. Learn, laugh, level up.
As a bit of backstory, on November 18th, 2019, Visionary Realms tragically lost their founder and chief creative officer, Brad McQuaid. Pantheon was his final brainchild and passion project, and in a lot of ways, it was the culmination of all the experiences he had gained over his career. So naturally, the sudden news of his passing sent shockwaves not only through the game's community, but also the gaming industry at large. But the remaining development team, though devastated, did not hesitate in making it clear that they will move forward with the project as planned. And even in just the past month or two, they've done a couple of gameplay streams, showed some progress, etc. So at this point, I think it's clearly not a question of if it's moving forward, it's how it's moving forward. And for the average person, I don't think it's unreasonable at all to be asking that. As the chief creative officer, Brad was, of course, largely responsible for overseeing the creative side of the game. Chris Rowan was and is in charge of the business side of things, but the elephant in the room is that with Brad now gone, how can we be sure that the game itself doesn't morph into something that he wouldn't approve of? Well, first, none of us can predict the future. The future for any game or anything is always uncertain, but there's a big difference between being uncertain and being worried, and I think that whenever you feel worried, the best thing you can do is to just learn as much as you can about what's actually going on. So with that in mind, I've gathered a few things that I think we should be considering to at least try to get a better idea of what's going on. And again, this is just my perspective, which I've gained by following the developers very closely over the past few years, which usually gives me a pretty good idea of what's going on. And then I like to relate to you so that you can stay informed too without spending as much time as I do. So if you want more Pantheon coverage like that, hit the subscribe button now if you haven't already, because that's what this channel is completely dedicated to. But anyway, let's try to unpack these thoughts a little bit. First of all, anybody that actually knew Brad knows that he was not at all shy about telling people exactly how he thinks MMOs should be made. I mean, because it was just his life's passion. Many times he would go on the official forums and just write these epic novels on how he envisioned Pantheon to be. And if that's what he's sharing with the general public, you can imagine how much more he was sharing with his own team. In fact, he spoke of many design documents that he wrote that outlined the future of Pantheon, even for post-launch expansions. So it's safe to say there's no shortage of insight from Brad still available in written record. And the great part about a lot of that being made public is that the community now has an opportunity to take an active role in holding the rest of the developers accountable to make sure that they don't end up implementing something that would be antithetical to Brad's values. So I'd suggest going back and rereading or re-listening to things Brad has said in the past and really getting a good, solid understanding of the foundation that he built for Pantheon, so that you can help provide more intelligent feedback when the time comes. Because I would also suggest that as we move forward, make sure you actually understand where the game is before trying to determine whether or not it's something that Brad would be proud of. And now, of course, that'll get easier as we all get our hands on the game through alpha and beta, but that time will come, so we might as well prepare now. But let's talk about the rest of Visionary Realms, because what's a good plan if there's nobody there to implement it? Because even though Brad was the most publicly recognizable name, the team was and is much bigger than just him. He never would have been able to make the whole game himself. He seemed to know that, though, because he had a way of bringing people together that were passionate about what he was passionate about. So even though he was the originator, all the developers have said that the reason they joined in the first place is because they want to create and play the same game that Brad did. They weren't just hired to do his bidding. They're fueled by the same drive he was, because that's just the kind of effect he had on people, I guess. So that's good, but every ship needs a captain. And if you've been watching development of the game closely, you'd see that ever since about 2015, while Brad had been overseeing things and providing input, it really has been Chris Perkins all along, who is primarily responsible for actually bringing the game to life as the creative director. Now, like I said, Brad already did the hard work of getting the ball rolling and writing all the design documents and putting the team together, but meanwhile, Joppa has spent a crazy amount of time with Brad, getting intimately familiar with how he thought MMOs should be made. And as such, he really has already been prepared to be the torchbearer of making Brad's original vision a reality. So as far as I'm concerned personally, as long as Chris is on the team, there's still hope of the Pantheon that we all want and need. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that the team is going to dearly miss Brad's guidance and wisdom all along the way. I don't think anybody's going to argue that, but I also don't think it would be accurate to assume that they're just going to be helpless without him either. Now, I understand that even before he passed away, there were a lot of people that had some concerns about the future of the game. But I've personally noticed that those are usually also people that aren't really following the game's development very closely, and so they're not seeing all the pieces of the puzzle. Now, going back to that massively OP article, you'd hope that somebody who claims to be a game journalist would be closely following the games that they're talking about, but unfortunately that's just not always the case. While I know some people feel like it's just absurd that they would even consider putting Pantheon on this list, I get it only in the sense that I know that there are a lot of other people that are feeling the same way. Now, it's bad journalism to not do your research and explain things better, but to me that's just unfortunate. I don't know, maybe my expectations for game journalism has just already sunk too low, or maybe I'm like the dad that's like, son, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Like, I don't know. Regardless, I hope that this video has cleared some things up for you and just given you a different perspective to think about. Because only time will tell, so all we can really do is just wait and see how things progress. And if you start to feel a little helpless, you can and absolutely should study up on all of Brad's design philosophies online, which I'll try to link to a few of the good ones below in the description, and then just make your voice heard if you feel the need once we see how things play out. But until then, my name is Bazgrim, and I'll see you in the next video.